All right. In today's edition of Cancel Uncle Lou, I am going to be ranking the conferences according to the cheerleaders. This is a video that I'm sure will upset no one and that everyone will agree on. So let's get started. I'm kind of tired about ranting and raving about off-season crap with spring games or transfer portal or whatever it is, changes to 14-team playoffs. I was just kind of crap that they keep throwing against the wall to see what sticks. So I figured we'd do something a little different today. And so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to talk about the cheerleaders in each conference, and we're going to rank them. A couple of side notes here before we get started. Notre Dame is not in a conference. Therefore, they will be placed into a category on their own. Number two, I struggled on what to do with Texas A&M. Since they're in the SEC, I'm going to have to lump them in with the SEC. However, I did consider treating Texas A&M like Notre Dame and putting them in their own category. But since they are in a conference, that just wouldn't be, it wouldn't be right. So they're going to be considered along with the SEC, although the argument could definitely be made that the Texas A&M cheerleaders definitely fall into a category all their own, to be honest, at least comparatively speaking, compared to the rest of the cheerleaders across the wonderful world of college football. Another thing to remember here is that there's been, because of conference realignment and teams moving from different conferences and things like that, there's been some conferences that have benefited from that. There's been some conferences that maybe have been hurt by that. There's been some conferences that maybe, some of the additions benefited them, but some of the additions might be holding them back. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go through. Should I start at the top or start at the bottom? Well, we'll start at the top. The conference with the best looking cheerleaders is the SEC. Now, this shouldn't be an arguable point, and it shouldn't be a surprise, and it really shouldn't even be debatable. The southeastern United States has got the best looking women. That's just all there is to it. And so that filters down to the cheerleaders, and they've got to be number one. Now, are there ugly people in the South? Yeah, I'm one of them. So there are ugly people down here, okay? There's ugly women down here too. Believe me, I've run into a few from time to time. But to sort of a broader point, there are good-looking people and ugly people in every state in the country. So, you can't say, well, I saw some girl at the Walmart in Little Rock, Arkansas with armpit hair and weighed 500 pounds. Therefore, the SEC can't be number one. There's good-looking people and bad-looking people in every single conference. But generally speaking, when you just talk about regions of the country or whatever, the southeastern United States is loaded. There's a lot of five-star talent down here in the southeastern United States, and so I've got to put the SEC number one when I rank cheerleaders across the different conferences. Number two, I went with the ACC. The reasoning is pretty simple. Why are they so high? Why are they two? Well, a lot of the ACC happens to be in the southeastern, or at least the southern part of the United States. I mean, we can start with Florida. Right, you've got the Miami area, which you don't even have to have been there. Have you ever seen a movie or a TV show or anything shot or filmed in Miami? You can't throw a rock down there without hitting a couple of five-star cheerleading recruits. So, they've got the Miami area. Obviously, all of the beaches up and down. Miami to warm weather year-round. So that's a big benefit to the ACC. They've got two schools. They've got Miami and Florida State. The SEC has the one in Florida. You move on up. They've got Georgia Tech, which is obviously in Atlanta in the Southeast. You got Clemson, South Carolina. You go up into North Carolina. You've got, of course, North Carolina, Duke, Wake Forest, NC State. Virginia is where it starts to get a little iffy. for the ACC. So those are all the positives, really, when it comes to the ACC, right? But you have to remember, with the good come the bad, okay? So I mentioned Arkansas and the SEC, and there might not be a whole lot to look at there, but it's completely dwarfed by the other SEC states. You're talking about Texas and Oklahoma, and of course Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. Yeah, okay, that might be sort of a drawback to the SEC. But anyway, the furthest sort of north you go with the SEC would be, I guess, Missouri. And, there's kind of a middle of the road type of cheerleading state there. Some 4-star recruits there, mostly 3 stars. But with the ACC, unfortunately, you got a lot of Northeastern there when it comes to the ACC. So, yeah, you do have Miami, you do have Florida State, you got Clemson, you got the Atlanta area with Georgia Tech, but you also have Pitt and Syracuse, Boston College. These are drawbacks. These are obviously drawbacks. Now, because of conference realignment, you get Stanford. You get Stanford. Is that Southern Cal? No, yeah, it's not really. You also get SMU, which is a benefit for the ACC. I think the ACC is a clear number 2, primarily because of the schools they have in the Southeast. But you're getting some credit, I think, for SMU. Maybe a little bit of credit for Stanford. But again, you got to look at the whole picture here. You're talking about the Northeast, long, cold, hard winters. Not conducive to a lot of 5-star cheerleading talent, if you know what I mean. So I've got the SEC at 1. The ACC is a clear number 2. With number 3, I've got the Big 12. And again, it wasn't really hard. And I'm going to get back to hit on some things here when it comes to these conferences again in a minute. We're kind of just running through the order here. But I've got the Big 12 at 3. Similar to the ACC, they've got some obvious advantages in the Big 12 and some obvious disadvantages. When you look at the Big 12, they've got several Texas schools, which is a benefit when it comes to the cheerleading talent available within the Big 12 footprint. You're talking Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor. And while TCU, and I think, is Baylor a Christian school too? Anyway, you got a couple of religious or Christian schools in there. But you could find yourself some good-looking religious women, and we all know, those are the ones. Those are always the ones. Anyway, beyond that, you've got a lot of the Midwest, right? So a lot of people, the whole farmer's daughter deal there can make some great cheerleaders. Somebody's got to be on the bottom of the cheerleading pyramid, right? So you get you some of them corn-fed girls from the Midwest. Unfortunately for the Big 12, a massive mark against them here is West Virginia. And look, I don't know how many of you been to West Virginia. I have. Okay, I've been there, and coal mining is rough in a lot of ways, and over time, generation over generation, that begins to show. Never mind the whole the wild and wonderful whites of West Virginia. Have you seen that show? It's not a show. It's a documentary. It's real. And there's a lot of that there. So unfortunately, that does get held against the Big 12, putting them firmly in 3rd place. In 4th place is the Big 10. And look, it's just the reality of the environment that these people have lived in and grown up in their entire lives. Cold, hard, rough winters, as opposed to, say, the SEC, which obviously has much better weather for the majority of the year. And over time, that has created a situation where there's just more talent, in this case, located in the southeastern United States than there is in the Big Ten. I mean, you're talking places like Columbus, Ohio, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern up in the Chicago area. I mean, these places are just not conducive to producing large numbers of 5-star talent when it comes to this particular case. I think the Big Ten a clear number 4. I put Notre Dame at 5. There's nothing real. They don't have, because Notre Dame's not in a conference, they don't have anything else to help prop them up. When you look at the Big Ten, this is why I have Notre Dame behind the Big Ten. When you look at the Big Ten, they recently acquired Southern Cal and UCLA. Okay, that is a big tick up for the Big Ten in terms of talent availability within the Big Ten footprint when it comes to cheerleaders. Notre Dame, because they're not in a conference, doesn't have the benefit of states further away or in different parts of the country to help prop them up. They're on their own, right? So the Big Ten benefited from Southern Cal and UCLA. However, another reason why the Big Ten is fourth and behind the Big 12 at third, while the Big 12 does have West Virginia, I already mentioned several Texas states in the Big 12, which is a positive, and the whole Midwestern farmer's daughter deal, which can be a good thing when it comes to the talent available for this particular list that we're doing here. The Big Ten was forced to take Oregon and Washington. And unfortunately, bearded women who sit on the sidewalk just isn't really what we're looking for here in this type of a list when we're talking about cheerleaders as they relate to the different conferences. So while the Big Ten got a little bit of a boost from Southern Cal and UCLA, again, with the good comes the bad, and you've got to absorb the Oregon and the Washington women and cheerleaders into that as well. It is what it is. In fifth place, Notre Dame. Now, if I would have had Texas A&M in a separate category, like I thought about doing, I didn't. I lumped them in with the SEC, and they're really the lone sort of check in the negative column when it comes to the SEC here. Potentially Arkansas as well. I thought about putting them in their own category, obviously, because, well, they've got male cheerleaders. So that's obviously the worst of anything on this list individually. In other words, if I were to rank everything here by school instead of by conference, Texas A&M would be dead last. None of us are interested in watching a bunch of semi-grown men with fifth grade buzz cuts running around in G.I. Joe uniforms that are 2 sizes too small, yelling for no reason while twirling a wooden gun and pretending that they're cheerleaders. No, who's interested in watching that? Nobody. So they clearly, Texas A&M would be dead last if I were to rank like every single school. They would be dead last. And that was a massive negative mark against the SEC, having Texas A&M. However, because the overwhelming number of SEC states beyond Texas A&M don't suffer from that same disease, and we're talking about cheerleading talent coming out of states like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, even Mississippi. Now they're not very bright there. Clearly, I mean, have you checked like the education ratings or whatever in the United States? I mean, but we're not talking. This isn't a spelling bee rating. It's a cheerleader talent rating here. So I would have Texas A&M dead last if I was rating individual teams, but because we're going with conferences here, Texas A&M gets the benefit of being lumped in with a bunch of home run hitters when it comes to the cheerleader contest. Okay. So to recap, I've got SEC number 1. It's almost all positives there with the exception of Texas A&M, Missouri being a little bit of an outlier, a little too far north. It's kind of a crapshoot there, 50-50 chance when you get up that far there. With the ACC, I have them as a clear number 2. They get the benefit from having a large number of schools and campuses that are in the Southeast. However, they're clearly below the SEC because they've got too many teams in the Northeast, and the cold, hard winters just aren't conducive to create the talent necessary to be number 1 on this list when you look at, Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, so forth and so on. The Big 12, clear number 3, several Texas teams, the whole Midwest deal. Biggest drawback from the Big 12 being West Virginia, obviously. And in 4th place was the Big 10, and it's just because all of their schools are up north with the exception of 2 new ones, Southern Cal and UCLA, which are offset, unfortunately, by the addition of Oregon and Washington, bearded women that sit on the sidewalk. It just, no one's interested in that when it comes to cheerleaders. Notre Dame 5th. They're located in a miserable part of the country that literally no one wants to be in ever. except for 6 or 7 Saturdays a year when they want to watch Notre Dame lose in Northern Illinois. They don't have the benefit of being in a conference where you would get other schools in other parts of the country that could potentially prop you up. So for that reason, Notre Dame falls behind the Big Ten at 5th and last place on the list, unless we were to separate out Texas A&M, who would be even worse off than Notre Dame for the reasons I've already mentioned. But there you go. Just a video that everybody can agree on. No one can get worked up about. #cancel Lou, and have a good morning.